We will not end this war until the enemy is defeated. That's the message from Israel's Chief of General Staff. The Israeli military has begun calling up tens of thousands of reservists, up to 60,000 troops, for its ongoing offensive in the Gaza Strip. Nearly 2 years after Hamas's brutal terror attack, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to crush the militant group and free the Israeli hostages still held in Gaza. His latest push, the full takeover of Gaza City. But critics accuse Israel's government of deliberate destruction, forced displacement, and the starvation of civilians. In response, several European nations are now backing a UN resolution to recognize a Palestinian state. On To The Point, we ask Gaza's devastation. Can Israel find peace through force? Welcome to this week's To The Point. I'm Javier Arguedas. It's good to have you with us. Let's meet today's guests. Shani Rozanes is my colleague from DW. She is DW's Middle East analyst. Daniel Bax is an Islamic studies expert and journalist for Germany's daily Taz here in Berlin. And Richard Schneider is a journalist for Switzerland's Neue Zürcher Zeitung and Germany's Der Spiegel, and former Tel Aviv bureau chief for Germany's public broadcaster ARD. He's joining us from Munich. To all of you, welcome. Thank you for being here. Shani, I'd like to start with you. The IDF already controls about 77% of the Gaza Strip. It now plans to occupy Gaza City. What does that mean for the course of the war?
Well, if you ask Israeli Prime Minister, this is going to be the final determining factor. He feels that, Gaza is the last bastion, the last stronghold of Hamas, and this would be finally the final blow to take them out of the picture. If you talk to the military, however, you hear a far more reserved estimation of how effective the next military operation can be. They understand that Hamas is not just a movement, a cruel, murderous movement, but also an idea that is rooted so deep, among Palestinian, of course, society. And, trying to fight until the very last operative of Hamas is gone is almost an impossible mission, mostly because Hamas is also recruiting constantly more and more. And the more the devastation in Gaza spreads, the easier it gets on Hamas to recruit even more people.
Mm-hmm. Daniel, the IDF chief of staff has reportedly warned against this operation, and hundreds of reservists are actually refusing the call to serve. That's new, at least in this scale. Why is there so much reluctance amid the Israeli forces?
Well, it's a catastrophe. It will be a catastrophe. And many governments in Europe are against this because they know it's the next step towards reoccupation of the Gaza Strip. And all the people who will live now in Gaza City, they will have to go to the south or outside of the country. That's what, this government obviously wants.
Although the Israeli government, of course, challenges that. Richard, Netanyahu is touting this invasion as a necessary step towards what he sells as an imminent defeat of Hamas and the release of the hostages. But didn't we hear that same premise right before the Israeli military was about to enter Rafah, for example?
Yeah, we heard it all the time. At the beginning, he said, then we need to take Khan Yunis, then it's the total victory. Then he said, we need to take Rafah, then it's going to be the total victory. Then he said, we need to occupy the Philadelphia route, etc., etc. So in other words, there is no such thing as a total victory, not a victory over a terrorist organization which is going to survive in one way or the other, that's for sure. And at the very end, this decision is only political and has nothing to do with military needs. And that we can see also by the very clear wording by the chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, who is saying time and again, there is a deal on the table. Hamas has agreed for a deal liberating 10 hostages, and we should take that, and we should not go into Gaza City.
Because in the midst of all of this, one of the main concerns, of course, or the main one, the people. More than 63,000 Palestinians are now reported to have been killed in the war in Gaza, according to the health ministry, which is run by Hamas. And the death toll is still rising. Here's a closer look at where things stand right now.
According to eyewitness reports, the Israeli army is intensifying its attacks in preparation for the planned takeover of Gaza City. Approximately 1 million residents are to be relocated to tents in the southern Gaza Strip. Israel's stated goal is to destroy the remaining terrorist strongholds of the militant Islamist group Hamas. Israel has promised extensive humanitarian aid to civilians, but aid organizations have repeatedly criticized the conditions in the refugee camps. According to the International Food Security Monitoring Agency IPC, more than 500,000 people are starving in Gaza City and neighboring areas. The Israeli government rejects this claim, saying the data has been manipulated. Prime Minister Netanyahu referred to it as a Hamas starvation campaign. After killing a Hamas spokesman and recovering 2 deceased Israeli hostages, he reaffirms the war objectives. The Security Cabinet reached a decision to defeat Hamas, making every effort to release all of our hostages. The IDF has already begun to implement this decision. According to an Israeli TV report, Chief of Staff Zamir initially cautioned the Prime Minister against launching a ground offensive in Gaza City, stating that it would jeopardize the hostages. Zamir reportedly advocated a deal with Hamas. But does Netanyahu really want a deal?
We just heard it, Shani. Hamas approved a hostage deal on August 18th. Netanyahu so far has rejected it. It includes a 60-day ceasefire. Despite all this pressure at home and abroad, why the reluctance to approve the deal?
Well, I think what Netanyahu is trying to do is actually keep both balls in the air. He wants to threaten with the military operation, but he still wants to keep any possibility for a deal still alive. Ideally for Netanyahu, what he says now, he wants a full deal, not a temporary deal for just a short ceasefire, not a partial release of the hostages. We're talking now about 10, when the estimations are that there is 20 of them that are still alive, but he wants all of them out. But that would mean Netanyahu and Hamas would have to agree on terms to end this war, to end this fighting. And we've heard Hamas saying they're willing to discuss end to the war and complete release of all the hostages. But, you know, the sides are so afar on what it means, you know, besides the exchange of prisoners and Palestinian detainees in return to hostages. All the rest of the details, that's where, you know, that's the crux of the matter. And this is where the two sides are very much apart. Hamas wants to maintain some sort of presence in the Gaza Strip for Israel. This is a no-go. And if, of course, Israel wants to see Hamas completely gone, it wants to see the whole strip demilitarized. It wants to keep, you know, security, a perimeter around the Gaza City and Gaza Strip, in order to allow, you know, for itself to secure its needs. And all of these things are no-go for Hamas. So the two sides are quite far from each other. This is why Netanyahu still wants to show that he wants to maybe, in case the leverage of the deal is working, to still squeeze something out of Hamas. But then at the same time, he's very much adamant to pursue on with the war, with, you know, the operation on Gaza if needed.
And that all is particularly painful for the families of the hostages. Richard, the Israeli government says that the hostages are a top priority, yet the vast majority of released hostages were released on the terms of negotiations and not military intervention. How credible is the assertion that this military operation will release the hostages?
Not very much, because even the military, even the generals are warning that this operation could harm the hostages who are still alive and could kill them at the very end, because Hamas already said a couple of days that they took the hostages to the places inside the tunnels under Gaza City, so they will share the same destiny as the fighters. In other words, they're using them as human shields, and everybody in Israel knows that. And of course, the families of the hostages and many Israelis who are protesting nonstop against this operation, they are very much afraid about what will happen to the hostages. They are not so much afraid what will happen to the Palestinian people, but about their own hostages, and they have their doubts that Netanyahu really takes that into account.
I also want to add, if I can, there's indications that at least 40 hostages that were kept in the Gaza Strip were killed because of military operation, an Israeli military operation, directly or indirectly in the Gaza Strip. So this is also, you know, when the families are objecting this war, saying it's not how we're going to bring them back, they have quite solid evidence to base their claims on.
Taking all of what we've heard into consideration, Daniel, especially the fact that Hamas apparently cannot be defeated militarily, or it's very difficult, is the Israeli government unaware of this? Or why then proceed? Why then go forward despite reluctance inside the country as well?
I'm sorry to say, but I think Netanyahu doesn't care about the hostages. I mean, there have been deals before. There was a deal with Hamas, and there were some hostages which were freed in their time, and there were hardly any hostages who were freed through military means. So I think the goals are different. The goal is not to free the hostages. That's what maybe Netanyahu is saying or not saying, but the goal is to reoccupy the Gaza Strip. I mean, there's this Riviera plan by US President Trump, and that's actually the goal. I mean, to re-establish a new occupation regime in the Gaza Strip and also in the West Bank. Actually, there are similar plans. I mean, it was always by the extremists of the Israeli government, the goal was always to have the whole land without the people.
Well, I think we need to, I mean, I'm not in Netanyahu's head, I cannot vouch for that, but I think for Netanyahu, I cannot say he doesn't care for the hostages, but I think he tries to zoom out and look at a bigger perspective of where this is heading. And for him, as painful as it is, and you also listen to his closest aides, the way they see it, sacrificing, in a way, the lives of these remaining 20 in exchange for jeopardizing Israel's long-standing strategic, defense policy and standing in the region. And well, it's a sort of a dilemma that he is facing now, and he's trying to, the way he sells it, he tries to look at the bigger picture and what it means. And as painful as it is for these individuals and their families, we know their stories, what his closest circle is talking about is the need to talk about the long-term sustainable plan for Israeli defense. And if that might mean that the hostages will not be freed, or not all of them, then that might be the price that Israel might need to pay.
We cannot look into Netanyahu's head, as you said, but of course there's also political implications to all of this, Richard. Some read the actions of the Israeli government as political. You also mentioned that there's an important political aspect here. What are those political implications for the situation right now for Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, first of all, he wants to stay in power, that's no doubt. And he's very much dependent of his two right extremist ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, who already very early on in this war, they expressed very clearly what they want. They want to occupy Gaza in full. They want to expel all the Palestinians, as many as possible, and they want to reestablish Jewish settlements there. So they have a very clear goal, which has a lot to do with their messianic religious ideology, which is not necessarily the same ideology Benjamin Netanyahu has, but he is dependent on them, so he's moving on. And at the very end, I think also what Shani said, that the fact that the people around Netanyahu are saying, well, we have to look into the bigger picture, and maybe the price for that is to sacrifice the hostages. This is a change. If that's true, this would be a real change in the ethos of Israel, because one of the things that was from the very beginning of the foundation of the state very clear is that this state will do everything to save Jews, that they will never have to go through what they went through for more than 2,000 years. Now, the 7th of October happened on Israeli soil, not even on occupied soil, but on Israeli territory. That's number one. And number two, we saw in the past, if we just see the negotiations for the liberation of the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit, where Benjamin Netanyahu in 2011 was willing to give free more than 1,100 Palestinian prisoners, including Yahya Sinwar, who is the mastermind of October 7th. So something is changing here, and that might also change, in general, the whole idea of what Israel wants to be and where it's heading to.
The hostages may be sacrificed, and of course there's lots of Palestinian lives at stake here. Daniel, the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is, as we know, deteriorating quickly. The International Association of Genocide Scholars says Israel's actions in Gaza fulfill the legal definition of genocide. Israel blames Hamas for the situation, for the dire conditions, and also talks to a campaign of lies by the Islamist group. How does this blame game affect the ability to actually protect the lives of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip?
Well, I mean, Israel was successful in dismantling UNRWA, so now they have this private company in charge of distributing food. And I mean, we know that hundreds of people were killed just trying to get food in the Gaza Strip. So, I mean, it's a campaign of trying of ethnic cleansing, which is they try to do in the Gaza Strip, and to clean certain areas of the inhabitants there and to concentrate them in the south and maybe in the long run outside of the Gaza Strip. That's the idea, and that's what's happening. And I mean, the reaction of the European governments is slow and too late, I think, because things are happening now. I mean, Gaza City is just on the verge of being the Israeli army is going in there, so and Europe is really not reacting in time to what is happening there. But Trump gave Netanyahu a free hand, so nothing is going to stop him.
We're going to talk about.
But I want to talk shortly about. I mean, Israel, of course, will be completely objecting the idea of ethnic cleansing. They claim this is nothing that they're close to trying to achieve. The numbers do indicate, unbelievable toll on civilians. I think what's important here, you were mentioning Trump, is that it seems to be a very big difference between what Netanyahu promises Trump and what he can deliver. He promises a very swift solution. Trump was talking about 2-3 weeks till we find an end to the Gaza problem. And if you listen to the military assessment, we were talking about many long months before anything.
Even a year for the Gaza City. Yeah.
Correct. So definitely, if you talk about Israelis, we know some ministers are talking publicly about the need to relocate, evacuate, chase out, clear out. There's many names that you can mention about how, they want to treat the Palestinians or rather see the Palestinians out of Gaza. But then at the same time, I don't think the Americans are backing that. And I don't think this is the top priority for Netanyahu. He seems to be, he doesn't mind if it happens, but I'm not sure how much of a target effort he is doing in pursuing that. Let's put it that way.
The intentions of Israel are a topic of severe debates, and the actions are in the meantime causing international backlash. Even Germany's chancellor is now openly criticizing Israel's action in Gaza for a halt to weapons deliveries that he is calling for. That's a major shift from a country that has long felt a special responsibility for Israel's security, rooted in the legacy of the Holocaust.
20 people have died, including 5 journalists. German Chancellor Merz has condemned the Israeli army's attack on Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis as unacceptable. I feel reaffirmed in my assessment and decision that Germany won't supply Israel with weapons to be used in the Gaza Strip under these conditions. He does not view his recent decision as a break in German-Israeli relations. Germany has consistently stood by Israel's side for 80 years, Merz stated. This will not change. But the tone has been becoming harsher for weeks. Israel must immediately improve the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza in a comprehensive and sustainable manner. But unlike Britain, France and Belgium, Germany will not recognize a Palestinian state for the time being. Germany is currently rejecting EU sanctions. Measures under discussion include suspending research cooperation, as well as travel bans for individual Israeli ministers or settlers. Will the German government maintain its current stance or increase pressure on Israel?
Richard, how big a deal is that partial arms embargo, let's call it that way, by the German government?
Well, it is a big deal. And indeed, there is a shift in the German government in looking at what Israel is doing. But the question of the solidarity of the so-called German Staatsräson is whether you are in solidarity with the state of Israel or in solidarity with any Israeli government and with anything that an Israeli government is doing. I think these are two very different things. And Bundeskanzler Merz, Chancellor Merz, is trying to change that. If that will be very successful, we'll see. If that is going to be the new policy, we will have to see as well. But as a matter of fact, to say that we are not complacent with what's happening in Gaza and we don't want to support that is, first of all, for a liberal democratic state, okay, even though there is always in the back the idea of the Holocaust and that Israel has that Germany has certain responsibility towards Israel, but not necessarily towards this government.
Shani, other countries like France and the UK are moving forward and preparing to recognize a Palestinian state. What exactly does that entail and how does it change the political landscape?
Well, de facto won't change much. You know, there's countries that recognize in Palestinian states since the 80s. We're talking about now, I think, even before the official French announcement, talking over 140 countries who already recognize Palestine as a state. This is a declarative move, and it mostly it comes to show that the very little trust that there is still left in the West, mostly, because this is the big change now. We're talking about Canada, Australia, France, Belgium, countries that used to be very strong supporters of Israel. And it shows a very big mistrust that there is for Netanyahu's government and their belief that Israel is interested in any way pursuing the two-state solution in any negotiation path. And let's, when we're talking about Germany, the Chancellor Merz himself, as Israel was fighting against Iran in late June this year, he was saying Israel is doing a dirty job for the whole world. So there is a wish or a need or an understanding of Israel's, security and threats and the need to fight itself. It's just that what's Israel pursuing in Gaza seems to be such a, because Netanyahu seems to be resisting for months now, for 2 years almost, any idea for a plan for the day after of Gaza. This is where he's starting to lose, support, which Israel had a lot of. At the beginning, as it all started, and through these months, there are many people who want to root for Israel. Nobody wants to see, even in the Arab world, nobody wants to see Hamas standing at the end of this conflict. But the means which Israel is taking, and the fact that it's the lack of long-term planning and a vision for Gaza, this is where Israel loses the world.
There is a lot of questioning of that end game for the future of Gaza. Daniel, you mentioned the so-called Trump Riviera. We have to be cautious, but there are apparent leaked plans for those proposals that would include the quote-unquote voluntary relocation of the entire population. How serious are these plans, and what do you base your assessment that that's the actual intention of Israel and the US, for that matter?
Well, action speaks louder than words, and I think the actions speak for themselves. I mean, everything what was happening at the moment is kind of going in this direction. I mean, I don't see any other, and this is not a sustainable solution. I mean, this will mean war forever. So everybody who also has empathy for Israel knows that this is not a way to go. Netanyahu is going into a dead end. And I think there is still in Germany a lot of wishful thinking, hoping that somehow there is a plan which is more sustainable and maybe the government is more responsible. And there is a lot of neglect. I mean, Merz even said, like when these journalists were killed in Nasser Hospital, he said he doesn't believe that they were targeted. Yes, they were targeted. I mean, we know in many cases journalists were targeted. And so there is a lot of wishful thinking to hope that things are not...
Who do we trust and who do we believe? We can't go there and...
Independent organizations like Committee to Protect Journalists, they have many cases where journalists were targeted on purpose, and sometimes Israel even says they target them on purpose because they say they're affiliated to Hamas, which is not easy to prove. So there is a lot of wishful thinking, and I'm with a Spanish Prime Minister who says, I mean, we have a serious problem in Europe with double standards. On the one hand, we say in Ukraine, we have to stop this because Putin is breaking international law and he's committing war crimes. And on the other side, we are not doing enough to stop Israel doing what it's doing. So this is a serious problem in the eyes of the world.
The European Union is struggling to impose even minor sanctions against Israel. Richard, do you expect that to change?
Well, that depends very much what's happening on the ground. If Israel is going to really to invade Gaza City, and if the operation is going to be extraordinarily bloody and brutal, then I think, of course, that Brussels will also change its course even more than it already started to do, and that maybe other countries will join, France, etc., and Belgium. But don't forget, inside the EU, you have also countries like Hungary and others, which will definitely not agree to any decision against Israel. So the EU will always be in a kind of limbo that at the very end, they will not be able to speak with one voice, so to speak.
Shani, considering those conditions and terms, the lack of international pressure, if you will, what could deter this operation then?
When it comes to Netanyahu, there's only one person he is listening to or cares about his opinion. That's Donald Trump. He sits in the White House, and that's all he cares for. He's the only one who actually has leverage on Netanyahu. And we don't really quite know where Trump is. If you try to follow his statements, he's well, being Trump, he's being a bit all over. Trump almost sees it, it seems like an action movie. He wants it, when he wants the good guys to win and he wants it all to be over and as soon as possible. He still hopes also for a Nobel Prize. So he wants to see a resolution and that brings, some calm and peace. He also understands, he has a vision for the extension of Abraham Accord. That means bringing in more Arab countries into, establishing relations with Israel. So he wants to see it happen, and he understands Gaza needs to be solved first. How exactly to do that? I'm not sure his plan is realistic enough.
We only have time for one closing question. The question of our show today: can Israel find peace through force? Yes, no. Richard?
No, it can't, but I'm not even sure that Israel is seeking peace.
All right. Shani?
Seeking security, which is different.
Well, so far it's applied a lot of force in Gaza and it didn't bring it too far when looking for peace.
No, we can't.
Consensus on this table. Thank you very much, all three of you, for being here today. To you, of course, for watching. And remember, you can always watch this show on YouTube. Just search for DW News and the latest To The Point episode. I'm Javier Arguedas. Till next time, take care and goodbye.